Hello, hello. Here we are again, coming to you from Broadcast Team Alpha on 44 different platforms around the world, and we're going to have some fun. Yeah, my name is Augie, and my co-host is not here, but we are also transmitting on the Conscious Awakening Network. You got to go have a look at them because it's got close to 50 different shows over there, and they are totally self-contained. They cannot be messed with, no censorship. So that's where they keep the good stuff if you can't be censored. So anyway, if you are watching us on YouTube right now, that's the place to be because that's where we also can participate. And you can participate in the conversation with questions. So please do ask questions, and then we will see maybe if we can get you some answers. That goes hands in hand. So anyway, I let's see here. I got a wonderful guest because Brian Tseng is the Solar Bee is coming back to Broadcast Team Alpha again, and like I've been saying, you know, the time of just knowing is over. Now it is the time of doing. And Brian is right there doing major things. His mission is wide. He has a mainstream, and he talks about the secret space program, military abduction, Montauk projects, and also he's on the speaking circuit and to wake up the nation. He is regularly on, I think weekly on Agent X on Agent X11 and Typical Skeptic and many other shows. So he also talk about, and we're going to talk about it this time also, the Star Trek future that we missed because somebody thought they were so important they didn't want us to have it. You know how that works. If you if you have a uniform, then you're always more important than us. And maybe we can have that Star Trek future here in another 10 years because there's some things happening right now in Washington because we have been promised that we're going to get some information about extraterrestrials and UFOs, and we'll see how far that goes. And I'm going to ask him about that. How maybe they will give us some, and how much we will get, maybe Brian can have an idea on that also. So for the next hour, he is with us. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Augie. It's a pleasure to be back, and thank you to everyone here with us, listening now and in the future.
Oh yeah, this
You
will
know,
be fun. There's a lot of good stuff happening in Washington now. And of course, the Democrats, they're having a bad time right now, and I love it. But on the other hand, he was promising us that they're going to dig out some UFO and extraterrestrial information. How much do you really think they will give us?
so first we'll start by saying that the highest levels of the secret government, they are themselves running full-on secret space programs, sometimes partnered with ETs, and they're not always positive ETs, by the way. And
Yeah.
we also have the testimony of Dr. Frank Strange, or
Yeah.
Stranges, I'm forgetting his name exactly, who wrote Stranger at the Pentagon about Valiant Thor, who
Mhm.
apparently was more from the Positive Galactic Federation of Worlds group to help offer to steer humanity in a more positive direction. This is during the height of the Cold War, the 50s. And in regards to a Star Trek future, the offer from that faction of more, we'll say more positive ETs, was to give the U.S. government, in exchange for nuclear disarmament and stopping all further nuclear testing, they would then, in exchange, give um, the U.S. government things like endless clean energy, 0 point energy, perhaps,
Yeah.
or anti-gravity, the things that they couldn't just weaponize. And unfortunately, it wasn't just up to the Eisenhower administration, right? Being president doesn't mean they're 100% in charge. You had the cabal types and Majestic 12
Yeah.
operating behind the scenes with their own agenda. I'm not saying everyone on Majestic 12 had their own agenda, but probably more than a few did, being part of the more Illuminati, Khazarian mafia, you know, committee of 300 types.
Yep.
And they instead signed the 1952 Greada Treaty, I believe it was,
Yep.
with the Greys, who and there are many types of gray species out there, but this particular species, I'm not sure if they're named the Dohu specifically, but they may have been a proxy ET race for negative draconian reptilian types. And
Yeah.
and that was where, in exchange for the technology from these grays, um, they didn't have to drop nuclear testing, but they would allow for supposedly limited human experimentation. And then they gave the U.S. government certain technologies, which some of these have since been reverse engineered and then applied to what are commonly known as super soldier projects and secret space
Yeah.
programs, among others. And then Uh, the Cold War, as we all know, went on until the fall of the wall, right? The Berlin Wall. And it goes on from there to modern day, and it's still a big mess. And we can kind of trace, not just the 3D matrix normie history, but we can look at a more behind the scenes exopolitical ET, intermixing view
Hmm.
of history, which would be actually a more correct, proper view of history.
Yeah. Yeah. This is a very large scope of operation. How much do you actually think they will tell us? Maybe about that much?
Yeah, because as long as they're playing the game of, the government may have knowledge of ET
Yeah.
existence and this and that, when the reality is so much more far advanced. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one thing to barely admit to ET life, when on the other hand you've got per Phil Schneider, Alex Collier back in the 1990s, Serge Monast, who was trying to talk out Project Bluebeam, William Cooper and others, talking about deep underground military bases in cahoots with ETs.
Yeah.
You've got, and not all the ETs necessarily have to be sinister. Um, Charles Hall, he talks about being on a U.S. military missile range, I think it was. Um, and he, as a serviceman, and he had benign encounters with more tall white or Nordic ETs, I think it
Yeah.
was.
Hmm.
But there's a whole spectrum. And what this points at is, behind the scenes, all this time, humanity has always had, as long as we've had history, contact with ETs. And a lot of it's documented in these Way Stone type artifacts that some of them are carbon dated to up to 20,000 plus years old. Okay.
Oh,
Of like alien type carvings and motifs and
yeah.
perhaps language on them,
Mm.
and magnetic properties, and some of them light up. Our friends like um, Joshua Sisler and Mike Forrest and Anthony Mickle and others with like alien carvings.net is with Mike Forrest's group.
Mm.
They're unearthing these, and they literally light up. They're showing um, these interesting properties, like basically ancient Mayan type or Wahalos LED lights and lamps, and some of them are magnetic and they levitate other pieces.
Mhm.
You know, um,
Uh,
but
I think I
you know,
think too that I hate to say this, but it's probably appropriate that there may be some things that are held back because some of it is really so bad that it will scare people.
well,
I,
see, the thing
I
is as long as you hold back the scary things, it enables those bad things to continue to happen. So is it better to reveal those bad things, scare people initially, and then
get,
have the
yeah,
conversation so we can deal with it to end those things? Or is it better for us to forever be in the dark, but literally sacrificing, having children be,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
right? And that they're lost because of what the general population is still in the dark about. And
yeah,
as a full disclosure advocate, I'm a much more tear off the bandage kind of guy, you know, um, where with all the things happening in terms of the biological weapons and being told to roll up our sleeves and the things that are being poisoned onto us in our air, our water, and our food systems, and all the frequency weaponry, I think that tearing off the bandage now is much better than driving off a cliff
yeah,
because we couldn't see the the cliff ahead of us.
yeah. And most of the contacts with extraterrestrials, they are. It is nice contacts. Well, they scrape the skin and get some samples, and then do a little medical investigation of the person, and then they send them home. And that, yeah, I know it's not voluntary a lot of times, but some of it is. But there are also, I remember one lady that was abducted. She was on the ship, on the table, and she was alone in the room, so she got down from the table and walked down a curved corridor. She looked in several rooms, and in one of the big rooms there were several cylinders full of liquid fluid with humans in there stored,
So
obviously
there's,
dead.
well, not necessarily. I don't know about her case, but there's a whole spectrum of what
Yeah,
we'll call everything from the negative alien agenda and AA, which a lot of people commonly term it, to more of a neutral type experience to even positive. So the
yeah,
negative would be the more negative ETs. These are painful experiments people are being subjected to, and generally that gives it away if they're not caring if you feel pain or not. Generally they're negative or neutral. Okay.
yeah,
um, where the people are having fun experiences where this is mixed with near death experiences, and they're coming to the realization that they were soul contracted to be part of a human, say, gray hybridization program to help boost the vitality of an ET species that because it's been spacefaring so long away from its home planet, exposed to radiation under unnatural conditions, they can no longer breed naturally. And if they're ever going to be able to return to that state, they need some of our genetic material because from the wider or longer view of history, an exopolitical perspective of humanity, um, we're really 22 or 24 starseed nations combining their genetics into the human experiment here on Earth, and we're literally a genetic repository.
mm-hmm, yeah. Now, after disclosure, what kind of effects do you think that will have on us, mankind? I'm not talking about the people that is already woken up to this, but fanatical religion people, what do you think can happen?
Well, I think that in the short term, there's going to be a lot of friction and some degree of hysteria for sure. Having said that, um, it's going to, in the medium to longer run, especially long term, uh, help to undo a lot of the, say, religious fanaticism. You know, if people can understand more the origins of humanity and the ETs, and that there's a spectrum of good, the bad, the ugly, then that will undo a lot of religious fanaticism, say all ETs, all aliens are demons. You know,
Mhm.
I think that, you know, that's an untrue
Yeah,
view of the world that actually holds humanity back. Um, the sooner we can know the truth that these things exist, and that, you know, and this is why I don't think the governments are going to reveal it, because governments have had too many dirty dealings. It has to come more from the bottom up, full disclosure, you know, with some leakage from helpful people and well-meaning people within these governments, right, which are already trapped, let's say, by the cabal forces who do
yeah,
not want any of this disclosed. The sooner we can have discussions and collectively as a society arrive at demanding free energy, clean, you know, 0 point devices,
yeah,
anti-gravity. We're never going to get that if people, 9 out of 10 people don't even know it exists.
right. The thing about it is also that I've been poking around in the Patent Bureau and I find that we already have that. But the people behind the curtain, they either intimidated those people out of even doing anything with it or killed them off. So,
We have the 1951 Military Inventions and Secrecy Act, something like that. But it basically authorizes the U.S. government to
yeah,
silence or neutralize anybody with a patent or invention that can destabilize the economy or have military
yeah.
um, uses, implications. And that basically uh, explains a lot of the disappearances and silencing of everyone from the guy inventing the water engine, you know, to the Searle engine, magnetic motors, and things like that.
I saw a video by Elon Musk when he was asked, what is the story on the water engine that you are creating? And he said the feds came in, they took both prototypes, and they took all the research and they told me to leave it alone, he said. He made an
There you go.
engine that runs on water only. Yeah,
Yeah, we I know from the testimony of others that clean, you know, these 0 point energy type devices, you know, they exist, they can power these ships, and
yeah,
then 0 point and anti-gravity and time travel, apparently all three intermingle with each other. If you have one, you have the other two,
yeah.
or leads to the other two. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Boy, what a world. Oh gosh. But that Star Trek future has always been, I mean, I have been a Star Trek fan since I was this tall, so this really
Let's
interests me.
define it. Let me define it for you a bit, and the
Yeah,
audience a bit more. Apparently, the way ETs view civilizations, their scale is to achieve what's known as a basic level 1 civilization. That's where, for let's say here on Earth, every human, every man, woman, and child is well taken care of in terms of we have all the food and health care, shelter, clothing, education we need, employment. Okay. And we also have, and I don't want to scare anyone by saying a one world government, but a government that's united enough globally that can speak for humanity. Right now, any galactic federation of worlds forces, let's say, or groupings, let's just use them as an example, right? And it apparently is GFW type people who were telepathically transmitting. the knowledge of the Prime Directive, a watered down version, to a group of people in Berkeley, California in the 1950s, of
Mhm.
which um, the Gene Roddenberry, creator of the Star Trek series, was one of them. Okay.
Yeah.
So just like very similar to how Maria Orsic in the Vril Damen, they were getting downloads apparently from ETs from Aldebaran, um,
Yeah.
giving them downloads for how to build Hitler's Bell Die Glocken and also some of their craft, which they then the Black Sun Vril societies and the Nazis later developed into the Haunebu, the German UFOs. And yeah, with this information that Gene Roddenberry is getting at the Prime Directive, this is possibly positively oriented ETs trying to see this knowledge to humanity so that when we get it together enough to achieve level one civilization status, that's when ETs can more openly, approach humanity and deal with us. But right
Mhm.
now, do they deal with the US, Russia, China, the United Nations? Who? Again, even the United Nations, I think a lot of people would suggest, is such a flawed vehicle,
Yeah.
right? It at best, it's a venue for nations to come and yell at each other. But could you say the United Nations represents a quorum of what humanity believes? No, that doesn't even exist. And
Yeah.
then, a lot of people, they may ask me, well, Brian, is my goal level one civilizations that we could automatically say join the Galactic Federation of Worlds? No, I'm more of the mind that humanity, we need to achieve level civilization one status, and then from there we can get to decide as humanity, undistorted and sovereign, whether or not, say, we want to join them and if they'd even admit us and how that would work. But that's further down the road.
Yeah. Yeah. And the funny part is that if we had listened to Nikola Tesla in about 1890 to 1910, we would have been traveling among the stars right now.
Yeah. Tesla may have had a Venusian background. Apparently, there may be some, underneath the surface of Venus and with high tech that's inhabitable to
Yeah.
different races. And Valiant Thor claims to have also been a Venusian. So, and look at them both bringing advanced technology offers to humanity. And both times, like Christ, vast majority of humanity turning your noses up at them and
Yeah.
throwing the proverbial rocks and rotten tomatoes.
Hmm. Yeah. And even the Nazis, when they created the Die Glocke, which they used as the engine in the Haunebu 2, which created a plasma field around the craft that nullified gravity inside. And it also, when they changed the polarity of each side, then you could use it as a propulsion device. And I tell you, I read about that and I have some of the specs on it. They could travel up to, I think it was 15 to 16,000 miles an hour with just that round little thing. And I don't know where to go with this one, but they did go to the moon and they have a base up there. I know exactly where there is. If for people out there, do their own research and go look in the Schrodinger crater. There's a building up there. It's an old building that was broken down from meteorites and things over the millennia, but the Germans found it and they started rebuilding some of it. and that's where they are today. That building looks just like a swastika, and I
Yeah,
have the NASA
Lunar
prints of it.
Operations Command, LOC, or Lunar
Yeah,
Operations Center. Apparently, they filled it in a bit so it doesn't look so much like a swastika. And then they've gone from the moon to Mars and then beyond. And so
yeah,
you've got the German Federation of Free Worlds, and then you've got the Japanese breakaway, which is sister to the German breakaway, the Empire of 1,000 Suns.
hmm yeah,
And yeah, and so humanity apparently is very much alive and well amongst the stars, numbering up to 1 trillion people by some accounts. When you take into account all the colonies that they've established and planets and rocks that have been taken over,
yeah.
and abusing time travel, unfortunately, according to many testimonies of
hmm
people involved in the Montauk projects, as well as the 20 and back type uh, secret space programs.
Yeah, that 20 and back is interesting, and I also understand that the Nazis, they they are working with the secret space program of the United States, and I think the Brits are even involved in that, as
With
well as
all of them,
yeah,
because they don't themselves probably don't call themselves the Nazis, but we'll just call them the Space Germans.
yeah,
Okay, basically the Space Germans, they won World War II. So
yeah,
everyone, the whole world, in a way, is under them. And that's why Operation Paperclip now makes so much sense in putting Werner von Braun to run NASA and all the rest of the German
yeah,
scientists, the Nazi
yeah.
people, and all that. That's why. And the Space Germans themselves are subservient to the rule of, say, negative Alpha Draconian groups. And
Yeah.
that's why, according to the testimony of many people in the full disclosure community, a lot, every Dark Fleet or Nachtwaffen, that's German secret space program fleet, their spaceship, space armada, has uh, every large ship will have a reptilian commander on it who everyone, including the German captain of that ship, is subservient to,
Really? Okay.
really.
Hmm.
And so with that, and because my understanding, this is per, uh, and if I mangle any of their testimonies, it's me misquoting them. It's not. I don't want to say it's them being incorrect. Like John Whitberg, for example, you know, um, David Purcell, Arkeem Ross, Susan Long, Veronica Bartolini, many of them, they'll testify that the German Nachtwaffen fleet and the super soldiers in these programs have been abused and utilized to basically do dirty work all around the galaxy. So
Ah.
you watch the movie Avatar, and it's
hmm
basically humans plundering an ET planet of resources. Well, the Draconians, they have a galactic history of conquering many different species and then forcing many of those species to then do their own dirty work of patrolling themselves and others. And it apparently turns out, per Alex Collier and others, that the Draconians and probably certain Anunnaki factions have found that humans in particular, we make a really effective fighting force for various reasons. And if we're to further go down this timeline unchecked, with these negative forces unchecked, then it's a very bleak future where humanity, we're turned as a species, as a race, into just the outright food supply and super soldier supply for these negative ET beings to then rampage, systematically
Yeah.
across the stars. It's not good. And then this helps explain why humanity apparently has a really, in Audrey Waters of a Star Netlink um, channel on YouTube explains a lot of this. We
Mhm.
have a very bad reputation amongst ETs. We're known as a
Yeah.
very invasive species. Why? Because what's their experience of us, watching us as marauders? But it's not because humanity on our own, we're just an invasive species. It's we've been under the thrall, unfortunately, of the negative draconians and Anunnaki and human elite puppets who are also demon worshippers. Um,
Yeah.
and they're all in cahoots with each other. So it's a very wide spectrum of darkness in itself, enslaving humanity. And
Yeah.
humanity's waking up to all of this.
Man, it's really some. Oh, I see we are down at the bottom of the hour here. So
Wow,
for
that went
those of you,
fast.
yeah, it is. So for those of you that joined us late, we are talking with Brian Tseng, and we are getting into every corner of the universe here. We're talking about the disclosure, and we also are going to talk. We're just talking about the Star Trek future that we can have, and I think I agree with Brian that we can still have that because I think it is coming. Not not next month on Thursday, but I think it's going to be down the road a little ways. But I think we are going to have it.
The
And
more the more of us work towards it, the faster that day will be here. That great day.
yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I really want to talk a little bit about because I have a good friend in Tucson here. Um, he is an ex-FBI agent. And John D'Souza, he says that Operation Bluebeam, the fake
Hmm.
alien invasion, is imminent. And he's been saying that for the last 6 months. So and he said that's the information that he is getting from behind the curtain. But I I have to disagree with him. But what do you think?
I am more optimistic that Project Bluebeam, it's the other side isn't really going to try to get away with it because it's already been exposed as early as the 90s by Serge Monas, the Canadian conspiracy realist who wrote about it,
Yeah,
and he died of a heart attack suddenly in 1995 in his 50s. And
yeah,
but I think that there may be variations of that. Um, the reasons why I say this is we still have the chemtrailing, and the chemtrailing, the aerosols that they're spraying in the air apparently are very conducive to these Project Bluebeam type holographic projections, where the deep state, having hijacked the militaries of the world through, say, the Knights of Malta, for example, placing their agents at the highest levels of all the militaries, um, they could then either do a fake alien invasion or a fake, say, second coming of Christ or other godlike deity figures. Okay. And then people these days seem to be leaning more towards, say, the fake alien invasion scenario. And it
mhm,
wouldn't just be holograms in the air, where the holograms are appearing to be very real, thanks especially to all the aerosols, like the metallic aerosols in our environment worldwide. Um, but they might also incorporate real life reverse engineered craft that our various militaries of the world, especially the US, may have,
yeah,
like TR-3B, Black Triangle craft, to then utilize real directed energy weapon and other sci-fi level weaponry to then try to, say, herd humanity to everyone to your local Walmart to then report for processing. Okay, and then presumably the New World Order would then lock down humanity using this fake invasion to hurt us using fear. And from there, uh, they put in the New World Order, and that's kind of like what people believe could possibly happen. And say, John, I think he's a wonderful man. Um, you know, uh, suspect could be imminent. I am more optimistic personally that the other side, they had to rename it from Agenda 21 to Agenda 2030.
Yeah.
Okay, the Georgia Guidestones got blown up. Um, as much as people out there might not like the bad orange man, right, in the White House, that guy seems to be disrupting a lot of the stuff the New World Order would want to do. And their candidates, Hillary in 2016, they had to steal it in 2020, and then Kamala in 2024, their overt candidates lost.
Yeah.
Okay. So all these things point to the other side is evil and big and powerful, but they're not all powerful. They're not omnipotent.
That's right.
And, um, Arkeem Ra has an alter who I've spoken with through via Arkeem. He's a Montauk Project survivor experiencer. Um, I've spoken through him with an alter of his who apparently is from a higher timeline, a higher Earth timeline that's about 4.5 years ahead of us in linear time. But they're a higher timeline in that the people of that Earth, they realize that the Vatican and Catholic Church were doing all this demon worship and cannibalism and sacrifice early
Yeah.
on. So they never that Vatican and institution never lasted for thousands of years into the present day, uh,
Hmm.
into the power structure that it is now. In that higher Earth timeline, the Tartarian Empire was never erased from history. So they have a lot more airships via blimps and air travel. And then they have smaller networks of roadways, not these huge highway systems across the whole country, paving over, so much of the earth. They'll have smaller street roadway networks and rental cars where it's a combination of like free energy with battery backup.
Yeah.
And then he says everyone in that timeline, in the US at least, is dressed up really nice. We're all like yourself, like wearing suits and ties, dressed up more like Dick Tracy or The Matrix when everyone's in their more idealized form of dress. Very fashionable, stylish. A lot of the health technologies are out there. He says in that Earth timeline, uh, the surface humans are aware of inner Earth exists and inner Earth inhabitants, but even in that timeline, um, access is extremely limited to the inner Earth. Like almost no one's from the surface is ever allowed down there, and they
Yeah.
still restrict photography and imagery so that it prevents people from easily remote viewing or trying to teleport or lock into them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
And even Werner von Braun, he was talking about the fake alien invasion. So, and I think that this program has been going on since the 1960s. They said back then we don't have the technology yet, but we will by the time we
Eh,
do it.
Well, we do. I mean, we already have a video I could pull up. I was viewing it before a show here, um, of stadiums full of people where it'll be like a lion, a holographic lion or dragon will be flying around the stadium, and the whole audience is
Yeah,
oohing and eyeing. And because to them, I mean, it looks like a solid projection, right?
yeah.
So technology's there. A lot of people believe, and now I'm been winning over to that. Believe it was used during September 11th,
Hmm.
and at least one, if not both, of the so-called planes that hit the buildings, at least one, if not both, were holographic projections.
Yeah.
Um, and then having said that, false alien invasion, we already have the alien invasions already we've already, these ETs are already here. Like we've been talking about during the show, we already have these secret space programs and deep underground bases in
Yeah.
cahoots with ETs, the mostly bad and then neutral and then probably some good and well-meaning, right?
Hmm.
And then humanity, we ourselves are of ET genetic stock, a very mixed and varied, stock. And then, we have our friends at the Farsight Institute who in I think it was 2024 November were told that we'd have worldwide UFOs in our skies, and then 3 days later, after they broadcast that, um, we had worldwide UFOs and still have them, and I've seen them myself. And I was complaining all my life. I'm 50 now. That I haven't really seen any of these UFOs. Maybe I'm not a high enough vibration. My eyesight's not good enough. Whatever. And then these last several years, I've seen a few UFOs. And I saw one the other day. We were
Wow.
all, myself and two housemates were looking up at the sky at the moon. We're marveling at how bright Jupiter was, and one of the housemates thought he saw something in the sky earlier. And while we were looking up, there's a super bright flash in the sky of like silver white, like almost like shining at us. And then it was almost like the thing just like zipped away super fast. But that was not a plane, not a falling star, shooting star, you
Yeah.
know, stuff like that.
Hmm. Yeah. Speaking of this, also now you also have some indirect contact with extraterrestrials. What are they telling you?
So many people in our community, like Christopher S. Jacobs and his partner Joanna Michaels with thelifting.net, I think is their website. Um, People like Sean Bond, who's also been in the secret space programs. You got Lily Nova, Elizabeth April. Um, these people, they've already had contact with ETs and have ongoing, mostly telepathic contact, or sometimes if they're closer with the ETs, people like Christopher S. Jacobs, these beings can show up to them in the astral and etheric as well as telepathic communication or download. Um, and so with Christopher and Joanna, for example, I've gotten to speak with Valiant Thor. Valiant Thor is still alive. He looked great in the 1950s, and as a Venusian, probably Palladian, and with their technology, they can live a long time and age and de-age themselves. He's very much apparently alive and active with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, one of their military groups, to help nudge or guide humanity without violating the Prime Directive in a more positive direction and away from being reptilian Anunnaki slaves and sex slaves and food and military grunt shock troop force.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's getting
And,
interesting
and,
when
and
you.
what are they saying in terms of what they're saying, Augie? All the positive ETs via whatever channel or contact, uh, also through David Purcell and Audrey Waters, I've had contact with these beings. Um, they, all the positive ones have the same message. Basically, they want to give us the knowledge that they have to help us dispel our confusion, but it's on us, humanity, to get our act together to bring whatever of the PDF file cannibal type so-called wannabe elites to justice, and to reform our own systems down here on Earth, and to do whatever we have to do to establish our own level one civilization,
Mhm.
to then, and especially to spiritually and consciously ascend in vibration and action and being,
Yeah.
to then close that gap. Because let's say they're way up here and we're asking them to come all the way down here to us. They're saying, no, 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 no. If they're up here relative to us in terms of at least having level one civilizations and above, where all their people are cared for and they're not necessarily tearing each other apart, at least within their own civilizations. Not to say there isn't a lot of intercivilization, interplanetary conflict out there. There's a lot, apparently, but we need to raise our own frequency and vibration much more to then allow the more open contact to happen. And then, having said that, there's a lot of direct contact happening behind the scenes through people who we refer to as star seeds. People who, will say we've all had previous lives before this, and many of us have not just had previous past lives here on Earth, but on other planets and other star systems around other stars. And during our reincarnation soul path, many of us chose to incarnate here now to then assist in the ascension of humanity. At the same time, Mother Earth is also ascending from what many people refer to as third, fourth to fifth density consciousness. And humanity is trying to catch up to Mother Earth as a whole.
Yeah,
And we're being held back by all these negative regressive forces. And then we've got these positive forces trying to come in over the top to do what they can within the prime directive to counter the negative ETs who have that level of technology, and then try to also help distort a lot of the misconceptions by bringing us truth so that we down here can better get our act together. But if we're always in Plato's cave in the dark, batting at shadows, then humanity doesn't have any hope of
yeah,
escaping.
yeah, and we know they're there. In fact, it was confirmed. The secret space program was confirmed by one of the senators. I think it was about 2012, 13 or something like that. I forget the name of the senator, but he was on a military appropriations committee where have seen the funding for it, and he confirmed and he said there is a space program. He says it is here. Uh, no, he called it. Let's see. Yeah, secret space program, and
Well, we
it's
know
there.
Gary McKinnon, the
Oh
hacker
yeah,
from the
yeah,
UK, unearthed or hacked the Solar Warden files, including extraterrestrial personnel, and then
yeah,
William Tompkins was a naval, retired naval whistleblower engineer, savant, who also spoke to Solar Warden and other,
yeah,
off-planet operations and fleets
yeah.
and ET
Yeah,
contact.
what McKinnon found that was interesting is that non-terrestrial officers and the name of ships that does not exist on the surface. So yeah, that
Yep.
was real.
Yeah, including the USS Hillenketter. And
Yeah,
then note the Germanic name, because a lot of this is done in league with the Germans to
yeah,
then achieve the US uh, secret space programs.
yeah. And the secret space program, they're on Mars, and there are scrimmages going on out there, and they have sometimes very severe injuries. And they're saying that they are going lay down in a med bed for a while and they get repaired. So, what do you think of these med beds?
Yeah. Oh, people like Rebecca Rose and I think Jason Rice and others have been on podcasts like Journey to Truth and the Typical Skeptic podcast,
Mhm.
testifying over and over and very consistently about how on Mars, there's something known as Mars Defense Forces, and basically it's humanity uh, doing Avatar on Mars and beating down and subjecting the native um, beings to Mars, including ant people and giant spiders. I know it sounds weird, but those were the ones that David Bowie was singing about, the
Yeah.
spiders on Mars, and also reptilian type beings that are intelligent and telepathic. And um, apparently, many people, like including Susan Long, she recalls, uh, and others, they recall being briefed that if you're chasing, say, an ant person and they run into a cave or down a canyon, don't follow them because they can telepathically communicate with the spiders, and the spiders will then come out and swarm you. And Susan Long has recall of being on Mars. Their super soldiers are wearing high tech armor. They've got kind of like laser beam type rifles that have like three different settings. They have like a sonic and a psychic setting as well as a kinetic type setting or laser beam setting. I'm not sure. And she remembers how these spiders, though, what they'll do is they'll sting you, it paralyzes you, and then they'll just like eat you. And she
Mhm.
remembers being stung, and her one partner, instead of leaving her for dead, she remembers the feeling of like while wearing her armor being bounced on his shoulder and feeling the bruising on like her ribs or hip while she was bouncing, and he was like, no, I'm getting her out of here instead of becoming spider food.
Yeah.
And then she was then presumably stuck on one of these regen they usually have, depending on the program, whether it's a German or a US or whoever, apparently they have regeneration tanks, or they also have these medical beds. And
Mhm.
then depending on the program and the ship, and maybe your own status within that program, you may get access to whatever level of technology that your rank and privilege would afford you.
Yeah. I also hear, oh, I've heard rumors about that for a year now, that there are some of these medbeds here on military installations which are used for certain military personnel. Have you heard of this, or what do you think?
Um, I mean, I think it's possible that these might be related to the 20 and back programs and various super soldier operations, so I wouldn't be surprised, but I'm sure it'd be kept under, huge lock and key. So,
Yeah,
I'd expect them to be more located in deep underground bases, say, than like, more easily accessible in a known surface base like Wright-Patterson. Yeah, they do lots of probably ET and reverse engineering stuff at Wright-Patterson, but yeah, I don't know, medical bed technology for me at least, that rates up there almost as high as a flying around UFO craft, just because the implications of what you can do with medical bed technology.
yeah, yeah,
How that would
and
transform our entire society.
mhm. Well, I am convinced that it is coming. Even Trump, very early last year, he made first few, maybe first month or so into his presidency, said there will be shortly. He said something that medical system will be revamped, and there will be maybe not even need for surgeries anymore. That will be healed otherwise. So there's something there that he didn't want to say, but I
Well, there's a
think
couple of
it's,
things there to read between the lines. For one, as president and also as like a billionaire, he's probably already seen a lot of the human level advanced technologies. I mean, we had Rife, Royal Rife, coming up with
yeah,
these terahertz frequencies decades ago, orgone type energy to
yeah,
heal. We had Tesla, and then the Tesla wands, plasma healing technologies. We've got the red infrared technologies, the crystal mats, um, all sorts of electromagnetic technologies already, just at the human level, normal surface human level of technology. And then he's probably seen more advanced stuff. And then he may also be referring to, just de drugging America and the world
yeah,
by not giving so much money to these poisonous pharma companies, and doing so many of these jab campaigns and
yeah,
rollouts, um, in addition to maybe someday. But what I say to people is a huge motivator for the full disclosure movement is to clamor for and demand this technology, all of it, to be released, but at the same time be realistic and don't hold our breath, right?
Yeah.
um but fight for it as hard as we can. So it's like hope for the best but prepare for the worst. It's kind of like
Yeah.
that's my attitude. But but by but by doing the work that we can and awakening as many people as we can, we are hastening the day when this technology, all of it, any
Yeah.
of it, becomes available. And the longer it takes for us to get off of our butts, or at least to have conversations like this,
Yeah.
collectively as a society, the longer it's going to take for us to get anything, or it'll never happen.
Yeah. But there's this concept, knowledge is power. So as long as they have the knowledge and we don't, they have the power and we don't.
Right. And they've been enslaving us with it, lording over us with it, and
Yeah.
abusing, terrorizing us with it.
They've been stonewalling and killing off people that get too close to the truth for, well, 70 years at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And people out there, they might say, what's all this conspiracy stuff got to do with moi, right? At Montauk, uh, at the Camp Hero Air Force Base with that Sage radar tower. It's this giant like radar dish tower with a radar thing would spin around on top.
Yeah.
Part of what they were experimenting with there was beaming frequencies at people, including the nearby town, to see if they could get people to be angry and violent or sleepy and numb. And that was in going back to say the 60s, 70s, 80s. What's that have to do with the rest of us? Well, now the technology that we have in our phones, they've weaponized it. It's in everyone's pocket. They weaponize it on the atmosphere with weather warfare,
Yeah.
generating storms and blizzards, and all of that has everything to do with us. It's just how long is it going to take for us to wake up and catch up?
Yeah. Absolutely. Gosh, we got 2 minutes left. And let people know where they can get a hold of you and watch your shows and watch your interviews and tell us about that.
Yeah. Thank you, Augie. Every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'm on Agent X11. It's a 1 hour show, sometimes 1.5 hours, and my you know contribution to that is Brian the Solar Bee presents, and then we'll have people on who are ET contactees